Hi, this is Billy Childs, and wow, this is such a COVID has brought all of these different streaming platforms to the fore and changed our way of doing stuff, and so this is like a new experience for me, a new forum for me to talk in. Like I'm just talking to my computer screen right now, but I'm actually talking to, by the end of the week, I've been told maybe a couple thousand people. So, hello, everybody. Um, it's really good to be here. And I guess I should start talking about, things, related to myself. First of all, I want to thank Gail Boyd for inviting me on this platform. Um, it's always welcome to have a forum where actually the general public kind of is interested in how jazz musicians think and how we perceive things. I'm in this room a lot, writing music and having headphones on and like kind of just keeping my nose to the grindstone. So I'm so focused on creating music. I'm a lot of times I don't even look up to see if anybody's paying attention. Uh, so it's good to know that there are platforms where we can talk about our, things, our issues, things that are important to us. And so basically, I should tell you a little bit about myself. I was born, right now, I'm here in Sierra Madre. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I just celebrated March 8th. I celebrated my 64th birthday, 64 trips around the sun here. And except for a brief time when I moved to Brooklyn, I was bicoastal in 93 to 96 or something. I had a place there. Um, I've been based here in Los Angeles. And I grew up here kind of, I guess, when I kind of found my voice in music was like around the 70s. The things that got me into jazz were, well, my parents were both school teachers and they had incredible and eclectic tastes in music. So I heard anything from Bach's B minor Mass and Handel's Messiah, all the way to Motown, to Antonio Carlos Jobim, Nat King Cole. Um, Everything was playing in the household. And I had two older sisters who were very creative also, Joy and Kirsten. Kirsten is a musical playwright living in New York City. Uh, and I, just had all of these riches. And it was a very, really a great, loving family situation and household, very secure. And music was always playing. There was always laughter. There was always, games and teasing and stuff like that. And I grew up very comfortable. And so I really, was kind of gravitated toward music. When I was 2 years old, when I would hear Bach, I still remember this when I was a kid, when I was two or three or something, when I'd hear Bach or Handel and it got to the fugue part. I would really love that part because it was always cool to me to have a voice sing a line and then another voice come in a few seconds later and sing the same line but in a different key. I didn't know that there's different keys. I just know that it sounded cool to have these two, like everybody singing different things, but at the same time, and then all work together. So I grew up in that household. Like, so in the early 70s, in 71, I was 14 years old, and my parents sent me away to this boarding school for boys called Midland, which now is right across the street from Neverland, Michael Jackson's old house. Um, but back then it was just like cattle ranches and stuff like that. So I went there, and that's where I kind of found the piano. I had always been, I had a next door neighbor named Leon Biscara who introduced me to jazz. Also, my older sister Joy introduced me to jazz by bringing home records. So I had that love of jazz, but when I went to Midland, I found the piano. Um, and just started playing things by ear. And the catalyst that really got me into becoming serious about playing the piano was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And Keith Emerson, if you don't know him, you should check him out. He's a genius. He passed away, unfortunately, maybe 4 years ago, right around this time too. I think March 11th. Um, and he suffered from depression, so he killed himself. He committed suicide. Um, but he kind of changed the game in terms of in terms of like introducing the synthesizer to popular music. Uh, I think he took the first synthesizer solo on this tune "Lucky Man," um, and he introduced the Moog synthesizer and all of these things. But he was also pivotal to me because I had never heard someone mix genres like that, like rock and classical and jazz. You know, he wasn't a natural jazz player. He didn't come from that legacy, but he incorporated those elements into his music and very successfully and brilliantly. And it was a huge influence on me. And it told me that it was okay to mix genres and kind of and do that. So I grew up with the sensibility that multi-genre music was okay. You know, there were no labels, there were no boundaries. One wasn't better than the other, one wasn't different than the other, really, in its intent. And I believe that the intent of music, at least the intent of my music, is to give the listener a dramatic experience, you know, to make the listener feel or think or want to act. Um, and music has the power to do that. And no matter what genre it's coming from, um, no matter what idiom, no matter what country or culture. Um, I think its aim is to do that, to move the listener. Um, and so I try to do that. And Keith Emerson, Laura Nyro, Herbie Hancock, um, Miles Davis, Paul Hindemith, Igor Stravinsky, all of these were like huge influences on me at a young age. Um, so when I came back to civilization, because Midland was a very rural, a very austere existence. You know, you had to chop firewood to put in a stove, which would burn fire and heat the water, and that's how you got hot showers. It was crazy. Um, but when I got back to Los Angeles from there, because it was a boarding school, I was about 16 years old, and then my parents, being educators, knew that I needed to know what I was doing because I couldn't read or anything. I couldn't really, and I didn't really think, you know, analytically about music. Um, so they put me with this teacher named Marianne Usler, who changed my life. She was a first year theory teacher that I had, and she put me behind a piano and she had me play something, and all I could play was like that, you know, and I'd play it in every key. You know, I would just play the same run. And then she said, "Do you know what you're doing?" And I proudly said, "No," uh, as if to say, um, I don't know and I don't need to know because I figured it all out, you know. And she said, "Well, by the time I finished with you, um, you're going to be able to name everything that you played. And I thought, you know, I was a 16-year-old. I didn't know very much. And so I thought, oh, you know what? I'll just humor the lady and just play along like I'm paying attention to what she's telling me, what she's teaching me. It ended up changing my life because I was able to see how these, you know, how music moved, how it worked, the mechanics of it, you know, things, at least the mechanics of it from the standpoint of the Euro classical concept, the common practice concept, which was like the music of, you know, the Baroque period, the classical period, and the Romantic period, you know, which is what most of what we know as music theory is based on. But there, you know, that's not to exclude other music theories, the theory of East Indian music, the theory of African music, um, different modalities. It's not to say that, but this opened my eyes about the music that I had been hearing my whole life. Um, and what was key for me is knowing what it was and knowing how it worked. And so I did that. And then I started realizing, you know, I studied composition at USC later for the next 4 years, and it opened so many doors, I can't even tell you. Um, uh, but, uh, oh, and by the way, in this theory class, I also met my lifelong friend, Larry Klein, who I collaborated with much later, you know, like 7 or 8 years ago on the Laura Nero project. He produced it and I did the arrangements and was the artist. So Larry Klein and I first met in that theory class of Marianne Usler's, and we became, you know, lifelong friends. We were both like 16 years old. Uh, and we developed, he got me in Freddie Hubbard's band. It changed my life. Um, so I've kind of like after I graduated from college at USC with a degree in composition, I started thinking about how am I, what am I, what what is music? How am I thinking about music? And what I've come up with is that I see music in shapes. You know, so every line, every movement, every kind of texture that I hear, it's kind of like I also see it. It's almost like a synesthesia, but of shapes. And that's kind of like a template that I use to conceive of music. It's actually how I learned music back at Midland. I would see the shape, you know, like an A flat major seven looks like this to me, you know, and an A major seven looks like this to me, you know, and C major seven looks like that, G major seven looks like that, you know, and so on. So that's a very basic example of what I'm talking about. But when I hear a very, you know, quick passage, you know, like something like that kind of has a shape to me. It kind of, you know, kind of looks like this and then, you know, this and then, but it's going down. So it's kind of complex. So you combine what I'm trying to say is that what I try to do is combine music and how I see it in shapes with life, what it represents in life to me. And that kind of is kind of the basis. That's at the root of how I compose and how I conceive of music, you know. And when you think about it, music, if you think of music as a language, for instance, then how you like the words, like you take the word apple, Apple, you know, that's an A, and those are symbols, those are mere symbols of what we're talking about, a red apple. So when you actually encounter an apple, you bite into it, it has a taste, it has a feel, it has a shape, it has a color, it has all of these things that are not described in Apple, right? So it's just a mere shape. So when you think of like notes, A flat, C, E flat, and G, that those are just like symbols of what you're actually trying to say, which is like A flat major seven may symbolize water to you, or it may symbolize action to you. It depends on how you use it. So I started thinking about all of these things, and they're just symbols. Um, and so if you look at it like that, you know, then classical music, jazz, pop music, anything, it's all the same because it's coming from the same well. And then you kind of combine them in ways that are useful to you to make the dramatic statement that you're trying to make. So that's kind of like at the cornerstone. Sounds very esoteric and new agey and stuff like that, but it's not. I mean, in this age where people want the actual straight dope, the information, like just give me the information. This is not that. This kind of has a more, you know, emotional, psychological bent to it because I really feel music kind of covers that. Um, Also, I wanted to talk about is shifting gears. Um, the experience of living, you know, in this COVID existence, it's really been tough, because this has been my whole world. Um, other than going out riding my bike or going to Descanso Gardens, this beautiful park around where I live. Oh, by the way, Monica Herzig has a question. Do I have absolute pitch or is just the shapes? No, I don't have absolute pitch. I have relative pitch, which I just associate that with good musicianship. I hear a note and I can name the other note in relation to it, but I don't have perfect pitch or absolute pitch. But it's just the shapes, and the shapes are very vague, very vague. They're not defined. They're not an actual shape I could draw on a piece of paper. It's just something that I see in my mind. But anyway, getting back to this existence, um, it's StreamYard and Zoom and Facebook and FaceTime has become my world. It's become my window to the outside world. And how I deal with that is ups and downs. I'm not going to lie. I've gotten depressed, um, and I've gotten really, down. But then, I think that as human beings, we have a need to congregate, and I think that will come back. I don't. I really loathe the phrase "new normal." I can't stand that, because that's like kind of a new resignation of what a disagreeable normal is. You have a totally screwed up normal situation that is persistent, and then you just say, "Oh well, that's the new normal." That to me, it's unacceptable because it's unacceptable as a musician that we cannot congregate. That's just we can't survive like that. So I always hold out hope that as the vaccines, with Joe Biden as the president, um, and very on top of the vaccination situation, as with those becoming more and more accessible to everybody, the situation will thaw out and we will be making music together and, relating to each other, which is essential in the human existence. I mean, all business, all worship, all entertainment, all governance is done communally. It's just the way we, it's just the way we as a species have to exist. And so we've survived viruses before, we'll survive this one too, and just wearing the masks and listening to people who know what they're talking about, and listening. I mean, if I heard Arnold Schwarzenegger say something very interesting, he said, if 9 doctors are telling you you have cancer, and you should do chemotherapy. And one doctor is saying, no, no, you don't have to, everything's fine, and they all went to Princeton. You're going to listen to the nine doctors, you know, because it's nine versus one. So everybody who's credible is saying wear your face masks and take your get a vaccine as soon as you can, and this thing will dive down. And so as soon if we all do that, we'll definitely be in jazz clubs connecting and collaborating, because I look at making music as a collaboration between the musicians and the audience. We'll be doing that as quick as we can. Um, yeah. So anyway, I'm looking at some of these questions. Uh, there's so many artists, and there are so many artists in the same shape. They're feeling depressed because the thing they are meant to do, they cannot do. Yes, that's exactly. But I feel like I'm an optimist. I feel that we will be doing what we're supposed to be doing, because I mean, as much as the artists need to put this music out in a visceral and immediate live situation, I think there's also just as great a need for the audience who is missing out on these experiences too. So I think, and that's what everybody's working toward. You're not alone in being depressed, but although depression works in a way that sometimes it makes you feel like you're the only one that's experiencing it. But when I talk to other people, and I mention these things, it's like it's almost like a breath of relief comes over them to find someone else who's feeling the exact same thing, So yes, um, hearing you and Mulgrew talk about music had my head spinning, especially when you guys started talking about Freddie Hubbard. Well, um, Freddie Hubbard was. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if were not for Freddie Hubbard. Freddie used to joke when I would play with him, and I was still going to school. I was in my junior year when I first started playing with Freddie, or it's actually between my junior and senior. Yeah, actually, no, I played a couple gigs with him near the end of my junior year. Um, he would say, "Yeah, and on piano, Billy Childs. He's getting his bachelor's from USC, but he's getting his master's from me." And he wasn't lying. It wasn't even a master's. It wasn't even a doctorate. It was something beyond that. Um, it was, I learned a few things. One concrete thing that I can say that I learned is I learned how to comp uh, by playing with Freddie. When you're playing with such a brilliant, iconic soloist, I mean, Freddie is one of the five great trumpet players ever in jazz, in my opinion. Um, when you're playing with someone like that on that level, whose ideas seem to be an endless fountain of melodic invention, then you can find these interesting things to do. The level of his soloing elevated the level of my comping. And what a great teacher to learn how to comp behind an instrumentalist, as to have someone like Freddie Hubbard. And so I learned that. I also Freddie was also endlessly patient with me. Freddie was like, there were times when it was clear I had no business on the same stage as him. Our levels were like this, but he let me, because he really believed in the legacy. He came from that legacy of playing with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, of like nurturing young talent. And so he had a lot of patience. He had a big heart, and he let me learn. And when he couldn't stand it anymore, he just turned around and say, "Lay out." But it wasn't. It was, if he was short with me or treated me what could be perceived as bad, it was never with a malevolence. It was always, it was irritated, as you might treat your kid who's doing something wrong, or is doing something to irritate you, you know. Um, at least that's how he was with me. Um, and so I learned so much from him, you know, and thank God I was able to relate that to him. I told him many times that he changed my life and that he made me who I am. And I'm thankful I got to do that, you know. And he always took it with humility, you know. There's a lot of stories about Freddie. You know, Freddie had flaws in his personality, um, but and so there are a lot of stories that surround that, and those are the more sexy, titillating stories to recount, and they're funny, you know, a lot of them. But at the core of it, Freddie was a decent human being. He was a good person who gave me a shot in this industry, gave me my only shot. He actually, you know, on one of his albums, he let me write a tune for it, and you know, that's how I got with BMI, you know. Um, he and he let me write, you know, my style of writing was definitely kind of like not in line with what the group was doing, but he let me do it anyway. It was a tune called Rustic Celebration. It's off the album Skagly. Starts a and so on and so forth. That's all I remember of it. But he let me play it. He let me write it, and they played it, and Freddie Sight read it down. Um, so I'm thankful for him. I'm also thankful to JJ Johnson. He gave me a chance, also as a 19-year-old, you know, to go to Japan with him, and I you know, I met him through his son, who's still one of my best friends, Kevin Johnson. So, you know, all this to say that the jazz community is like a legacy community. It's like a you know, one generation passes on to the next and lets the next learn, you know, on their watch. And I was fortunate to have some of the best teachers in the world teaching me how to play jazz. And on the classical end, I was also fortunate to have one of the best composition teachers, Robert Lynn, um, teaching me composition. You know, oh, Facebook user, am I on JJ's recording? Yeah, the first one, the Yokohama concert. Well, my first one. It's called the Yokohama concert. It's on Pablo Records. It was done in like '78, I think. But yeah, Robert Lynn, you know, I was a student of Darius Milhaud, and he was a brilliant teacher, great teacher, and he taught me a lot about the techniques of composition. I also want to say, give a shout out to Chamber Music America, because for the past 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years, I've been president of the board there. And Chamber Music America is a very, very important institution for chamber groups, where it's like kind of a service organization that is, you know, has grants available, has a conference, Chamber Music America conference that happens every January, where you can network. And it's a great organization. It's another organization that changed my life, because it plugged me in to the European classical world, and you know, with open arms, and I was able to collaborate with very many people. So I highly recommend you check it out. chambermusicamerica.org, I believe it's the title, and become a member, you know, and you know, do the whole thing. Anyway, I think we're coming to the end of our time here, and I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. I wish we had more time, and thank you, Gail Boyd, for having me.